Okay, so this is going to be a webinar on winter trucking safety. It's right around the corner, unfortunately. And just going over some basic things. If you would like, at the end of this presentation, I can always email you a copy of the slides used in a PDF form. This way you can pick and choose which slides you like the most, share them amongst your drivers. So let's get started here. So the introduction to this is driving in bad weather, especially in snow and ice, is risky due to more stop time required, poor visibility, traction, and increased unpredictability of the other drivers on the road. So we have put together this presentation in order to help you stay safe and accident-free. We're going to begin with the very basics. It's called engine starting steps. As you know, in a diesel-powered vehicle, fuel and air must get hot enough to create a combustion. It doesn't have spark. It works on combustion, which then creates its own spark to start the engine. So here are some common mistakes people make. They crank the engine over, running down the battery. And if you all know, extreme hot and extreme cold, that's when batteries die. So to help alleviate that problem, here's a trick a lot of people, especially newer drivers, don't know. All of our trucks have either a glow plug igniter or an air and fuel heater, which basically takes the cold air and fuel and it goes through a vapor, like a heating process, to help start the engine. If you notice, basically from 2007 up, all the trucks have a warming technique. To start that warming technique, you turn the key on the start position without turning the engine on. So turn it on, not necessarily start, turn it on the last position before you actually start cranking over the engine. And you will see a little glow plug indicator light or a little coil on the dashboard. And it usually takes about 15 seconds for that light to go out. Okay, so basically once that light goes out, feel free to start the engine. Give it a quick shot, 30 seconds, 15 seconds. Turn the key back off. If it doesn't start, turn it back off and repeat the process again. Because you really don't want to be cranking on that starter, because that'll drain your batteries in no time. This is when the pre-trip is most important. Be certain that the defroster and heater are working properly, wipers, wiper motors, lights, especially tail and headlights. Make sure washer fluid is topped off and be sure all the windows and mirrors are completely clean before departure. Be sure to clear up the snow and ice before operating the windshield wipers, especially on these trucks. Everything is fuse protected. The most common problem, especially on the Hino trucks, you go to get to your truck and there's snow and ice all over your windshield. The first thing you want to do is turn the wipers on. Don't do it. Clear it off first, because this is what happens. First thing that'll happen is if they're frozen shut, it'll pop a fuse. It's dark in the morning. Try to find that fuse and replace it so you can get your wipers to work is a pain in the neck. So first thing to do, clear off that windshield before you turn on the wipers. The next thing that can happen, you can get internal damage within the gears or something can strip. So you don't want that to happen. Be sure, to clear off the windshield of snow and ice. Make sure everything's free moving before you hit that wiper switch. And again, the pre-trip, your lights, common sense items, lights, any kind of freezing damage as far as, making it not visible, ice covering the headlights, ice covering the taillights. I don't expect you to climb up on top of the box of the truck, but it's just common sense items. Keep everything, free and clear as possible so you can start your day. Also, most of these trucks have air dryers for the air brake systems, for those that have trucks with air brakes. Maybe, they all have drains on them. If they're not sure where they are, stop at the hub branch. They'll show them where they are. We put air drains on all of these trucks with cables so you can pull them. It's a good way to prevent freezing, water freezing in the airlines. So maybe, do that on a daily basis after they come back from their route. They can pull those drain plugs. Takes a few minutes, just drain them. This way they know they're not going to have any problems the next morning. This happens quite often. I used to run a large amount of trucks, and you wouldn't believe how many people would fall off, especially doing deliveries on a slippery surface, whether it be the steps getting up to the truck or on a lift gate or on the back of the truck themselves, on the rear steps getting on the trucks. We call that 3 points of contact. And I suggest, especially the wintertime coming, print this out, display it for your drivers. Even though it's common sense, these things do help to eliminate possible injuries. The use of handrails and steps provided. Don't skip any. Check the condition of these handrails and steps during your pre-trip inspection. Make sure there are no breaks or loose screws. Make sure the steps and rails are free of grease and oil, especially if the equipment has been recently serviced. That can happen. If possible, when coupling and uncoupling your trailer, do it from the ground. If you must climb up, look out for the grease around the fifth wheel on the truck bed. Just common sense, especially around the fifth wheel, any kind of grease. It does get sloppy in there. Weather is always a factor. Rain, ice, sleet, and snow can cause your handrails and steps to become dangerously slippery. Always inspect and clean these areas during your pre-trip. The 3-point rule after each trip. Before you exit, run your hands across the mirror frame. If ice is built up on your mirror frames, your steps will also be iced over. So that's a telltale sign of a possible slip and ice on the steps. Never jump from a truck or trailer or piece of equipment. Never use a fuel tank as a step. And use proper footwear. Non-slip soles are the best, such as work boots. I used to preach on this all the time, and I still do. A clean cab is important. Keep tools, tire, bumpers, fire extinguishers in their proper place, which they should be anyway, out of your path of an exit. Garbage is one thing. You wouldn't believe some of the things we find in these trucks. These guys are in there for a long amount of time. It's their office. That should be clean. And take your time. Being in too much of a hurry will land you on your back. A 5-foot fall can be very serious. I've had guys break a leg, serious sprains. Doesn't take much, especially when it's cold out. It's common sense items, but I really suggest this is something that's really overlooked. Something as simple as slipping off the side of a truck, especially in the wintertime. This is also another telltale sign. This is over years of experience. Ice on the windshield equals ice on the road. So watch out for black ice. The ice doesn't have to be packed on the road to be dangerous. All it takes is a thin sheet to make driving hazardous. A good rule to follow is checking the ice conditions when the road looks wet and the vehicle in front of you has no spray coming off the tires. And you got to watch out. We all say, or I say, a reflective road can be a destructive road. So if the road looks shiny, you don't see any liquid spray coming off the tires, it can be black ice. Generally, it's over bridges, under bridges, overpasses, things of that nature. Always watch out for black ice. It's the most destructive on the road. This comes up quite often as well. Treating the diesel. Now, diesel fuel will turn into a gel when it gets cold. Some years ago, they lowered the sulfur content in the diesel. And it's almost like a biofuel now. It tends to gel up a lot quickly. So if it gels, it won't run. And this is a good rule to follow. Once temperatures start to average, 40 degrees and below, always you want to use anti-gel. Always add the anti-gel before you fuel up. This way it mixes properly. And be sure to use the correct amount of additive to fuel ratio. Generally, it's pretty simple on the back of the whatever kind of conditioner you're using or the anti-fuel gel treatment. It gives you a ratio how much to use. We used to say just dump it all in. It doesn't really hurt it to use too much, but to prevent overusing it as far as cost goes, use the ratio on the bottom. And keep in mind, Hub, all the fuel we use here, it's already pre-treated. So if you're getting fuel from Hub, you really don't have to worry about it. But when you have to stop at a truck stop somewhere, you're not sure if they could say they put in fuel additive, just get the anti-fuel gel anyway, just to be safe. Like I said, over the past 5 years now, we've been seeing a lot of gelling. I could give you from past experience, we had a really harsh winter like 3 years ago. I had about 8 trucks that gelled up. Generally what happens is either they don't run at all, or when they do run, they don't go above like 30 miles an hour because it's not getting enough fuel flow into the injectors. So just keep that in mind. It can tend to come all of a sudden. It's a really cold morning, and all of a sudden your truck starts, but you're not going anywhere. So that's what road service is called. We'll throw an additive in the lines, de-ice the lines. It takes a little bit of time. Slow down and maintain a safe distance. At-fault accidents are mostly due to excessive speed. Driving the speed limit may be legal, but often it's too fast for the snow or ice-covered roads. I say that for the rain as well. This rule should always be on top of any winter safety tip list. Keep a safe following distance. Always leave plenty of room between your vehicle and the vehicle in front of you whenever possible. And try not to play follow the leader. I used to drive a truck and stay in a long line with a couple of fellow drivers, or in other trucks all heading up north or down south. Traveling in packs, it sounds like a good idea, but you're traveling somebody, you can follow them right into an accident. Trucks can leave the road, and you can end up following that truck off the road also. So keep your distance. And as I said previous, be careful when driving over bridges and exit ramps. Airflow and water over and under bridges and exit ramps, they tend to freeze first. So always watch out. Exit ramps, it's a biggie. I know these sound like common sense, common sense things I'm bringing up, but it really should be repeated. You can use this for your own drivers as well. There are a lot of new drivers out there, especially on these non-CDL trucks, and they think it's just like a car, and it's not. They don't stop the same. It takes more to handle these bigger trucks. So the rules of the road for a car pretty much follow in a truck, but you have to be a lot more careful on a truck. Bigger, heavier, they can do a lot more damage if an accident does happen. This comes up quite often, to drive or not to drive. Now, I know you guys, these trucks don't run, you don't get paid. That's pretty much 95% of the what's going on out there. So I know there's a importance level and a stress level to get the deliveries done. But, always use good judgment. If the weather is so severe that you need to get it off the road, do it. Have the driver find a safe place to get off the road safely and wait until conditions are safe. You don't want to stop on the shoulder of the road. When driving in poor winter conditions such as blinding snow, other vehicles can mistake your position for being on the road and may result slamming into the back of your vehicle. I've seen this happen many a times. The shoulder is the worst place to stop. Try to get off the road. I know there isn't a rest area on a lot of these highways, especially out here, but try to stay somewhere safe. Parking lot, somewhere. Just get it off the road. And it's no time to be a hero. When the road conditions are severe, you need to realize that it's very dangerous to be out there. Don't feel that you are letting anyone down by meeting a delivery schedule. This conflict does come up all the time, and I used to say, you're not delivering, unless you're delivering blood or body parts, you really don't need to be out there. Everything can wait. You don't want an accident. You don't want anybody getting injured or killed. So this is when common sense things come into play. Watch the weather reports. Sometimes it's up to the driver. The dispatcher or the person in charge, they don't necessarily know, depending on what state they're in. They could be 2 states away. So take that into consideration about as far as driving goes. This is also, you may not see it from your end of the business, but we see it here. With 1,500 trucks on the road, this is very, very common. Parking precautions. This can really kill your day. So avoid leaving trucks in flow-prone areas such as loading docks where water and ice can form when bad weather is predicted. If you have a truck in a flooded area, the water is above the lowest lug nut, do not start it. Call Hub for assistance immediately. So This is actually a picture when I started with Hub. I went with road service, and I think it was my second day here. And the water was actually a little higher before I took the picture. It was actually probably mid-level with the front bumper. You know, there's a lot of electronics on these trucks now. There's oil that's held into the front and rear axle. You have any water in there that mixes with oil, you know what happens. And if water gets sucked into the engine, forget it. That can be a total loss. Hydrolock will take place, and that's not necessarily covered. We're not going to take care of it. We're going to end up billing you, the customer, for those damages. This truck here in this picture ended up being totaled. They started it, ran it for a while, and we pulled it out. It still ran, but it became hydrolocked, and it was just a complete mess. This was during the winter time, so you have a lot of road salt that was mixing in with this water. I can go on and on. There's also another thing that does happen. Avoid parking trucks where snow and ice can fall on top of the trucks, such as overhangs where heavy snow can cause the roof to cave in. This does happen, and it could happen in this case as well. You see this overhang here? Snow and ice can just fall on top of these roofs. They're not metal anymore. Most of them are see-through. They're very thin. It doesn't take much to cave in those roofs, and that will be charged to the customer as well. So if there's a storm coming ahead and you have a loading dock, load the truck and park it away from this area. Don't leave it there overnight. I know it seems safe because it's backed up against the dock, but you do not want to do that. Keep it high and dry. I know it sounds simple, but this does happen quite often. So this is a recommended emergency items list. This can be to the discretion of the company, the driver, depending how far they go, how much time they're in the truck. This would apply to over-the-road drivers, guys that go, they're gone for a day at a time, traveling through a few states, a few hundred miles, they're not back right away. So you want to have like a go bag or a go kit with emergency items. We'll go over it real quickly. Warm socks, hats and gloves, a blanket or a sleeping bag, non-perishable foods such as dried fruit, nuts, granola, bag of chips. Twinkies never expire, so then that would work. Extra medication, some of those, blood pressure medication or something like that. Maybe have that as well. Bottle of water, even a shovel, small foldable shovel will work. Flashlight with batteries. Small first aid kit. Multi-purpose tool. It's like usually a cutter, pliers, all in one. Jumper cables. Basic toolkit with screwdriver, pliers, small things of wrenches, bulbs, spare fuses, which you should have anyway. Even though all the trucks have spare fuses in the fuse panel, you want to carry spare fuses anyway because that's one of the latest gotcha violations they're running these trucks on. So you want to have those as well. And don't forget the duct tape. Windshield de-icer and scraper, fully charged cell phone and a charger, and extra washer fluid. If anybody has anything else they'd like to add to this list, feel free. It's generally a good idea to be prepared. The last few winters have been rough. Hopefully this one hasn't been as rough as the last two. So it's better to be safe than sorry. My call is lighten up. Keep your lights clean. Whenever you're able to stop in a safe place, clear off snow and ice, which build up in foul weather. A lot of people think the heat off the headlights or tail lights will, end up clearing any kind of ice or snow. Well, now with the LED lights in production, it doesn't happen anymore. So you want to keep them all clean. Brake lights, don't forget about the brake lights. You want that person behind you able to see you. Especially these, people in cars that don't necessarily look up very often, and you get rear-ended in a truck. A lot of times, even though it's not necessarily your fault, you want to avoid that by keeping your brake lights clean, as well as your headlights. So the next section I want to get into now on part of this is the diesel particulate filter and the DPF and how it works with the regeneration. Get this set up here. So that we have a lot of issues, like I said, you don't see it from your side. You may see it, any kind of DPF problems or regen problems. What we call it, did you perform a regen on the truck if they're having issues? The check engine light comes on, the regen light comes on. So I try to make this as basic as possible. And there is a video out there. I can't play it on this, but if you go to hubtruck.com in the HTR Learning Center, we do have a DPF regen process video with a YouTube link, and it's from Isuzu, and it's one of the best presentations I've seen. Even though it is from Isuzu, it works the same way with all brands because the regen method works the same across all manufacturers. So I really strongly, if you have a new driver or if you're picking up a new vehicle, you're not sure how it works, you're going from a non-regen truck to a newer truck. Basically, it started in 2000. I believe 2007, 2010, that's when it started. So it's been around for a while now, and that's our most common breakdown or confusing the driver or the company how to perform this task. So let's go through these steps, and I really advise, if you want this, I'll send this to you, and you can print it out, put it in the truck for the driver to have. So let's get started. So what exactly is it? A diesel particulate filter, referred to as DPF, is a device designed to remove diesel particulate matter, or soot, from the exhaust gas of a diesel engine. All diesel trucks now are equipped with a DPF to comply with federal EPA regulations. This isn't just big trucks. This is pickup trucks. Anything with a diesel engine now has a diesel particulate filter. That's basically what it is. It's a ceramic core that goes in line of your exhaust. So you don't see the big black smoke coming up anymore unless they do it on purpose when they remove the DPF filter or they crank up the injector boost and the PSI, or they call it rolling coal. Kind of a trend now with some of these guys in diesel pickup trucks. But generally you don't see that anymore. It's not like it was years ago. So that diesel soot gets trapped in that filter, and it's like blowing through a straw, with a sponge inside that straw, and eventually it's going to start to get clogged, so it has to be regenerated. So the regeneration is a method that removes that soot. Over time the soot will build up in that filter and the channel walls, and so in order to remove the soot, a process called regeneration, in which the filter is regenerated to its original state. So it's basically cleaning out that filter so it continues to breathe freely. The flow of exhaust continues to move freely through the filter itself. There are several different types of regeneration. A lot of people don't realize it. It's always going on. It's not just when you're hitting that button. So the passive regeneration occurs when exhaust gases are hot enough to burn off the accumulated soot during the vehicle's operation under the following condition: highway driving, speeds above 30 miles an hour, high load conditions. There's no driver interaction usually required under those conditions. So the key thing to know here, the hotter the exhaust, the more it's cleaning out that filter. So when you're doing highway driving, or that you have a heavy load and that engine's working harder, where the exhaust is getting hotter. Therefore, it's burning out the soot that's accumulating because it's getting hot enough. The key thing is heat. That's what burns out the soot. Then you have active regeneration, and that occurs when the soot accumulates in the filter enough to raise the back pressure. Now, the back pressure is, like I said, that sponge inside a straw. It's the force going through that straw. When it gets to a certain limit, there's a sensor in there. This process is initiated by injecting fuel into the exhaust automatically, almost like an oil burner at your home. It works basically the same way. Active regeneration would normally occur under this condition: city driving with a light load where it's stop and go traffic. No driver interaction is normally required under these conditions. That's when you notice you're coming up to a stoplight, or you're going up in idle. You're going up to a stop, you put it in park, and the idle starts going up. That's when it's doing it on its own. It's raising the exhaust temperature by raising the engine RPMs and exhaust. Let me go back. It's raising the engine RPMs, and it's injecting fuel into the exhaust, and you get that funny smell. It's like an oil burner smell. It's burning out the soot. So again, if the truck's not going fast enough, it's not doing it on its own, that's when it uses the assistance of actual fuel to burn out the soot. Now this is where manual regeneration comes in. This is where we have the most issues. And when do we have it? In the summertime and in wintertime. We have a report that goes out of all the roll calls. We know what's going on out there. Usually once a week we get a roll call report, and there are different codes. What's happening is extreme heat, extreme cold, the trucks run long, they idle longer. So now soot is getting built up at a higher rate than they normally would. Of course, the driver wants to stay cool in the summer, and he wants to stay warm in the winter. It makes sense, but here's the problem. The longer that truck idles, that's when a manual regeneration will have to happen, which is not a big deal as long as it gets performed. So a manual regeneration is required when the vehicle is driven in heavy stop-and-go traffic, such as the city, or just on the expressway during all the traffic we have to deal with out here, or heavy periods of idle time. This is due to the exhaust unable to achieve a hot enough temperature to burn off the accumulated soot. That's when driver interaction is required. All trucks that have a DPF have a manual regen button. It's a little cloud, looks like a little puff of smoke with a valve in front of it. They're all pretty much use the same system. So I suggest you give this to your drivers as well. When and how is a manual regeneration performed? Now, there's plenty of alarms with this, so it should not go ignored. A warning will occur when the regeneration light turns amber, followed by an audible chime. This will be a warning that the DPF is partially clogged and will require the driver to do one of two things. He wants to drive above 30 miles an hour until the amber light goes out. You know, he doesn't have to if he can when conditions permit. Place the vehicle in park or in neutral with the parking brake on and pressing the regen switch. What will happen is the idle will kick up and the burner will kick on. But be sure to park in an area that's free of leaves or any combustible material. Temperature from the exhaust is very hot. I mean, you can see a visible vapor, like a heat vapor coming out of the exhaust. Be sure to park it in a safe area. Now, I get this question all the time, but what about in the city? I don't want to get an idling ticket. You know, that comes into play. You know, if the ticket agent's coming and he's going to give you a ticket, there's really no arguing with them. You tell them you're doing a regen, they're not going to understand. You know, it's a never-ending battle. So you want to try to do it where you're not going to be, you know, receive a ticket. You know, if they were all mechanics or in the trucking business, they would understand, but they don't. They're just looking out for income. So do it in a place where it's safe. You don't have to worry about getting an idling ticket. And I'll get into more how to eliminate this process as well. The regeneration process normally completed in about 20 minutes. That's on the long end, generally in 10 to 15, and the regeneration light will go out. This indicates the regen process is complete. Now here's the thing. If your driver is starting the regen process, make sure he does it to completion. He follows through with that regen, all right? Because if he does not, may cause some problems in the future. You don't want to start the process and stop, and then start it again and stop, because the exhaust is very hot. So you want to complete the process. So this is what happens, especially with newer drivers. They're not sure, or they don't do it at all. So what happens when the DPF regen is not performed at all? Well, I try to make it as basic as I could on this sheet here. If the amber light is ignored and the light turns red, followed by an audible alarm, this will be a warning to the driver that the DPF is severely clogged and will require a manual regeneration immediately. Now, if they go one step further, ignore the red light, ignore this red light here, and then it goes to a check engine light, should light up. This will put the vehicle into reduced power mode. So basically, over time, it will start reducing power and end up limiting to about 5 miles an hour. So that's when road service is called. The driver calls up, my engine light is on, it's not moving, it won't go over 5 miles an hour. Road service will be called, And what they do, they hook up their laptop into the ECM, and what they'll perform a forced regen, where it tricks the computer to let it regen. If that doesn't work, then it's time to go to the dealer. And from past experience, and it's beyond our control at this point, if it goes to the dealer, it's going to be there a while. So you're gonna be down a truck for a while. Even though we issue a replacement, it's not the same truck. It's a hassle. And a DPF filter is only cleaned out at the dealer. They have to do it all. We do it. We don't even have an in-house DPF cleaner here. We have to send it out if need be. But most of the time, that's something a dealer has to do because there's warranty issues that come into play. So this has to get done. I went too fast there. And this has happened many times as well. What's DEF? DEF. Especially for the newer drivers out there. Diesel exhaust fluid, we refer to it as DEF, is a mix of 67.5% water and 32.5% urea. That is designed for diesel-powered vehicles in order to meet the enhanced federal EPA regulations. Here's a little graph here, cooling system, your diesel particulate filter, and the DEF tank, and it helps burn off that soot and keep the air nice and clean. Now just keep in mind, most of these trucks, when the system is working properly, the air coming out of the exhaust, believe it or not, is cleaner than the air going into the truck. So just keep that in mind. Are there issues? Yes, there are. But for the most part, these systems do work really well. A lot of this question comes up quite often. How much DEF is used? It usually runs around 2% of the diesel fuel usage. All vehicles have a gauge and an alarm as well. So there's no need to run out. There is a DEF gauge, just like a fuel gauge. It tells you how much is in there. All the branches carry DEF. It's available at most of your retail stores, which I'll get into in a moment. Your auto parts stores, even Walmarts, sell DEF. And is it toxic? It's considered safe and non-toxic. You don't want to drink it, but it's non-flammable and safe for an environment. But it is a non-toxic material. It's water and urea. Now, what happens when you run out? Well, the same thing will happen. It's all these trucks are computer controlled now. Same thing if you don't perform a manual regen. It'll go into a limp mode where we can slow down to 5 miles an hour until the DEF tank is refilled. It won't require the truck to go to the dealer as long as they refill that tank, but it will limit, it will not run without DEF. So that's basically, you have to use it. Before I get to the conclusion, keep in mind we do have customers that use their own DEF, but here's the thing. Don't ever dilute it. We had a case where a customer was keeping big barrels of this stuff outside of their warehouse, and rain and snow would form on top of these barrels. Just keep this in mind. If it gets diluted, there is a sensor in the DEF tank, and if that ratio is not correct where it should be, it'll cause the truck to go into limp mode as well. So it'll basically not let the DEF go into the truck, and then the DEF will have to be pumped out. So if it gets diluted from water and snow and it's outside storage, you want to keep that in mind as well. You want to make sure it doesn't get diluted, it stays in the container that it came in. All right, so this way that doesn't happen. Every person that operates a diesel vehicle should be familiar with the regeneration process and also how the DPF system works. If operated correctly, it should provide users with trouble-free service and reducing air pollution. But remember that DPF is regeneration system. If it's ignored and service is needed, this will equate to lost productivity due for waiting and for road service call. And you don't want it laid up at the dealer. That was my worst nightmare when I ran trucks. If I went to the dealer, I knew I wasn't getting that truck back for at least a week, and that was a good week. If your driver's not sure, all hub branch managers, rental managers, and even the jockeys should be fully trained with the DPF system. And they're always available to help you with assistance. Before I end this, and if anybody has any questions, this is what I recommend as far as the regen goes. Have your drivers, they do a pre-trip in the morning. At the end of the day, they park their truck, they're doing their paperwork, hit that regen button when they're in your own parking lot. And if it regens, fine. Now they got a clean regen or a DPF for the next day, and they won't have to worry about it. Try to get them in the habit of just hit that button when they come back. And if the regen kicks on, let it run through. If it does not kick on, then they don't have anything to worry about. They can perform it at a later time. But once they get into the habit of doing a regen when they get back, unless you're on a city street, you don't have to worry about an idle ticket. The next day that filter is clean for the next day or even the next driver. So maybe get them in that habit. Have it part of their what they call a post-trip inspection. That's just a little hint that'll go a long way. So let me just bring this up here. Does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, you can feel free to type it. So if nobody has any questions and you would like a copy of this, I'll be more than happy to send this to you and you would have it by the end of the day. I have this in a PDF form as well. So you can print out whatever you like for your own drivers and your own staff. And it's useful material. So if no one has any questions, well, I don't see anybody there. If you have a question, feel free to type it in. So we'll leave it at that. I'll give one more minute if there's any questions. Oh, doesn't seem like much. Okay, so everybody, I really thank you for attending. This is also going to go up on our website as well. So you can always feel free to watch at any time. And thank you again.